Ready? All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 8th. Doesn't feel like November, well, feels like it outside. Anyways, council, maybe before we start, the public will notice there's a new seating arrangement in honor of our first anniversary. And there's a small prize for whoever can first figure out the logic to the seating arrangement. So we'll leave you with that challenge. Council, let the record show Councillor Inkster. Wow. Okay. So much for the drama. Council, we got an agenda in front of us. Are there any omissions or corrections or conflicts? If not, a motion to adopt, please. And seconded, all in favor of adoption, the motion carries. Without further ado, we'll go to page 2 in the budget survey summary, which I believe is Mr. Douglas, who's still in the same seat.
Not alphabetical. Yes, thank you very much. This year we put the budget survey out later than last year. So last year it went from late July or early August till early September, and we had very few participants. This year we started in September, and we ran it just a little bit later into October than we had planned. So somewhere around the 10th of October. And so we had significantly larger number of respondents. So that was kind of nice to see. I wasn't going to go through the survey in specifics, but you know, generally it's still a small survey, right? We have say 11,000 people in the community. We had 170 some odd respondents. So, you know, it's hard to statistically rely on any of the outcomes, but I think it's really good information as we start to head into the budget process. I think there's a lot of things there that we can utilize or talk about as we go through to see where the community stands on certain items. So
anything you want to highlight?
Well, I guess I think, well, I'm on page 6. I'm on page 6 of 40 right now. And it's kind of neat to see that we had probably pretty good representation from many of the different communities of Sechelt. You'll see that also the age. Let me get to that one. There was quite a large contingency of older people responding to this, so that was fairly interesting. And I guess my other comment would be like the 3 top items, you know, they were water, affordable housing, and BC ferries. With
Great.
that, if any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Great, thank you. Oh, folks. Yes, Councillor Bell.
Through the chair, first of all, I just would like to make a general comment that I agree, although it isn't, you know, a large representation for as part of the community. I really want to acknowledge the community that did give us this feedback and thank them for the feedback on behalf of the council. It's really helpful for us to get this feedback, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you to those people that did reach out, and keep on coming because we do want this feedback. It's extremely important. I do just a couple of general comments. I certainly do agree that right up bang on with the issues, like in terms of, you know, what we see them as. And the other things that I liked sort of coming in here was the knowledge around development pieces, really around what they want to see, things like mentioning gray water catchment, you know, those kind of things being part of our development. So I think it really shows that overall that our community is fairly well, it really knows what they're talking about and is well versed. So thank you overall to the community, and let's get this even bigger next year because it really is helpful. And thank you for making this happen. Beth.
Thank you, Counselor Bell. Other things, folks? No. Okay, I guess I should have asked at the beginning, Mr. Douglas, how were these questions? What was the premise behind them, or was there a logic that you used to?
Sure, the first few questions were standard from, let's say, previous years. Where do you live, age, those kinds of things. We tried to ask a question about each different division. And if we miss a division one year, we make sure we pick one up the next year. So you're never kind of out 2 years, you know. And so so that's kind of how we kind of started the questionnaire. We don't like to have too many questions. We think that if we went to 18 questions, people kind of get lost or not. Well, this is half an hour now, not
Yes.
10 minutes.
Right.
So, yeah.
Do you have a way that you, like one that jumped out at me, please make the budget process more approachable. And I'm going, well, I like the words, but I don't know what that looks like. Was there a way that you could go back to respondents? I presume not.
No, not directly.
Yeah,
No.
because it was anonymous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Counselor Bell?
Again, through the chair, just my question was a bit of a follow-up too. Because and I might have missed it on the website, is the survey on the website as well and the results on our District of Sechelt website?
For now, they will be through the agenda package, but
Okay.
we will put them on this specifically on our website. Yes.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because I certainly noticed within there as the number of people, in terms of the engagement piece that look at the website. That was number
Mhm.
one in terms of the District of Sechelt website. So it would be really good for us to put that information on, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Good, thank you. Counselor Inkster?
So contained in this budget document as we go forward to budget is a lot of information, as Mr. Douglas mentioned. There's a number of pieces in the information presented to us that may be projects that we are about to implement. There's a number of fixes that we're going to do in there. People mention things sometimes where something wrong with a stop sign, or something wrong with a road, fix that. Another example is we play softball, the fields are always closed. So I'm not sure if, and obviously what we're hearing from Mr. Douglas is that the information has come to us with not necessarily names attached. But is there a way that we can let the community know, sort of to clear the table a little bit, that this is being dealt with, this is being dealt with, this is being dealt with? Not all the fields are closed. Upper Kinnickinnick, which drives me crazy, and I'll always complain about it, but that's one field. There's other fields that are open as an example. So, you know, just to let people know, just to clear the table, this is actually something that's already been budgeted for. These fields will be fixed. Thanks.
Please, if you got something.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. We haven't gone that step. We're doing that now with the community associations. You know, but each one brings in 3 or 4 projects or, you know, operating items that they want us to look at. You know, here there's hundreds of them, right? So we're not opposed to looking at something, but we haven't embarked on trying to roll this into answers back to the community yet.
But I think it's a good idea. It's rich fodder to say, hey, we heard these questions and here's the answer. Yeah. Great, thanks for that. Okay, I think that's before us for information. So unless there's anything else, council, we'll move to item 5.2, the short-term rental program update. And Mr. Allen.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. Pleased to report the year in review for the short-term rental regime for this year. So earlier this year in February, Council did ask by a resolution that we present a yearly summary of our regulations in November. And so here we are, we provided quite a large report that has a variety of information in it, and we hope that it is helpful for council. And so the purpose of the report simply is to provide the summary of the year to date. Due to the agenda publication process, the information is valid through to late October, but there is a 2-week lag between writing the report, publishing it, and having this meeting. Nonetheless, most of applications and so forth have been through, and it's a little bit through the prime tourist season, of course. So it does provide a good snapshot of the year through to October, and we feel it's ready for council to review. And so prior to providing a summary, would like to acknowledge that the number of staff that have been involved in this throughout the planning and development division, from building inspectors, bylaw officers, planners, as well as communications, it's taken a significant amount of staff time and resources to not just write this report, but to manage this regime throughout the entire year. So while my name is on the report, I'll be the first to recognize that there's a number of us that had a hand in drafting this and would like to share the wealth in that regard. And so this year as a whole has been a lot of work for us. This has been a significant contributor to our overall work plan for all 3 departments within the planning and development division. And so it started off this year going through the temporary use permit process, the acknowledgement of lawful non-conforming status for some properties, followed up by the hearing, the appeal hearing, which is a unique process. It is permitted within the community charter and is designed to maintain that balance, the checks and balances between administrative staff decision as well as policy decisions made by the elected officials. And I think that example we had was a fine example of how the system is designed to work and provide those balances. And it was a success. Following up from that in the spring and moving into the summer, we then worked with those that were approved with their various licenses. We did start intake in January, and many of the type 1 and type 2 licenses, particularly those who had been operating previously, were approved in short order. And then moving on primarily to the type 3 licenses, as well as the non-conforming. And then the challenge is there, of course, we're going through applications. Complete applications typically move through our approval process within a couple of weeks. Incomplete applications, of course, required follow-up. And often parking was a key one. For example, whether or not the land for parking was on the property or on the road allowance adjacent that might appear to be the property. And a lot of those types of subtleties that we had to work through. And so there was a lot to that. We had a review committee of staff. We had Mr. Nias and Ms. Stepovic are here today and later be able to answer questions if council desires. But between planning, building, and bylaw enforcement, we had a staff review team that would look at all applications from the simple to the complex and make decisions on how and when to issue. The odd time where there was uncertainty, quirks in the bylaw, missing information, or disagreement with applicants, those were brought to me and provided information, in some cases provided decision. And it really worked well. It was our attempt, of course, to manage this both fairly and reasonably. We're professionally bound to do so. And there were occasions, admittedly, where the levels of service that we were able to provide didn't necessarily match the applications or the applicant's expectations. And there were times where we would have some challenges and perhaps need to have meetings or extended email conversations with applicants to get to where we are. And you'll see the information in the report talks about issued licenses, pending licenses, and so forth. And so some of those are still underway, and many will be deferred to next year at this point, given we're in November. And all the way through this process, knowing that we have bylaws in place that we are duty bound to uphold, as well as council priority that was established in number 1 priority being encouraging neighborhood fit, number 2 being protection of long-term rental supply, followed by promoting business equity and regulatory equity, supporting tourism, and enabling supplemental income. Those were our 5 priorities as established by council. And we kept that in mind as well as we went through our approval review process. So we started this report in September. It was a significant amount. You can see it's many pages long and matching all the data. We're really diving into the minutia of this data, trying to determine the future of particularly type 3s, and are they justified, and how many, and so on and so forth. And so there was quite a lot of discussion about that. And I'm sure council is aware that the province has been making a series of announcements of proposed legislation respecting housing and promoting housing in this province. And the first of those was respecting short-term rentals. And their decision, frankly, set us in this direction we're in now and paved the way for us. We established a type 1, 2, and 3 last year, and that's in our bylaw. That's the nomenclature that we use. But the more common would be principal residents or non-principal residents. And so what we call type 3, the province is effectively saying that that's no longer permitted use in municipalities in British Columbia and other than resort municipalities or areas with a greater than 3% vacancy rate, which choose to apply to the province to be exempt. I believe our vacancy rate, although CMHC does not provide firm statistics here, our vacancy rate is known to be less than 3% and hovering between 0 and 1% for the most part, for long-term rentals, that is. And so we are now subject to these regulations. And that then leads us toward our recommendation, essentially. And they've also removed the provision of lawful non-conforming status as it relates to this use. And of course, that being a large part of our hearing process last year. And so that was a bit of an eyebrow raiser. I wasn't sure what to expect. And when I read that, that certainly drove home their position on supporting housing in British Columbia, followed by the more recent announcement respecting zoning and multiple dwelling units on properties. I'll be working on a staff report to council at a future council meeting this month to provide more information on that. And so not to get sidetracked now, but my point is the province is making a number of announcements respecting housing that will commence in 2024. And so to that end, that created part of our recommendation to match the provincial direction and to slightly amend the direction we've been going thus far. We recommend essentially moving forward into 2024, particularly after May 1st, utilizing type 1 in-home and type 2 suites and cottages as our 2 types of short-term rentals. This is a direction that many communities have taken in the last couple of years, smaller towns, bigger cities, and we recommend amending our bylaws. There's one reference in the zoning bylaw and amending in particular the Schedule B of the business license bylaw to move towards type 1, type 2 business or short-term rental operation and related business licenses. And at this point, we do not have a maximum allowance of numbers of those units. Those are unrestricted, which again would be as generous or more generous of a regulation as compared to municipalities in British Columbia. It's the standard practice, if you will. And the original council resolution from when these regulations were adopted was to have a 2-year monitoring process. So of course, we would carry on with that and report again approximately this time next year to see how the program is working, what the numbers look like, and determine if there have been impacts. Admittedly, it's a bit hard to say what the impacts might have been this summer as we were blending in and staging our way into the regulations here. And so it's been a bevy of work and information here, and myself and my colleagues are available to answer any questions that council may have. And I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allen. Council, go ahead, Councillor Shepherd.
To the chair, it's a huge amount of work. So I really appreciate the amount of work that planning's put into this. It's a very divisive issue in the community. And I know the previous council and this council have done a lot of work in trying to accommodate a lot of the existing rentals in the market, but steer a course between an industry that's here, that's so important for the tourist industry, but also between neighborhoods and neighborhood fit. So first of all, thank you to the planning department for all of this work. Can I just ask a couple of questions about the statistics that you provided? I'm in general support, obviously, of the recommendations, because that's the way the province is sort of steering us. But could I ask the planning director to talk to compliance? I think there was a recent article in the Coast Reporter on compliance in Gibson's versus Seashell. Thank you.
You got enough?
Yeah, I will start there. Thank you. I did see that article as well, and another eyebrow raiser, and it would seem perhaps a higher level of compliance in Gibson's that we've experienced in Sechelt. I do feel, generally speaking, with the type 1s and type 2s, the compliance has been higher and easier. I think that once we move through the temporary use permits, which was only a small number, and a larger number of lawful non-conforming, some of those, even those who received temporary use permits, did not come forward and apply for business license, which was somewhat confounding, I suppose. Others across the spectrum, folks that I know were very much aware of this whole project and those that we did not know and were not familiar with and hadn't heard from, that we dealt with in terms of our enforcement and follow-up. And so that would be a target that we'd be looking at achieving next year, is finding a way to increase and improve upon compliance.
You referenced Gibson's. I'm not sure, did that answer? Okay, very good. Yep, thanks. Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I was just wanting some confirmation on how I heard the province's plan, that they were only going to allow one like suite per unit for STR. And I think some of ours have got more than one. So I didn't see that in the report. So I'm just wondering about that. And because that could affect some of the type 2 STRs. And I noticed there weren't any in the mapping that show STRs in the village area or the village neighborhood really of Sechelt. So that's a bit of a concern to me, because it implies to me that nobody is really taking transit to come and stay in an STR. They're taking their cars, I guess, and taking the ferries. So that's something that I think we might want to think about, because it's a little, adds to some of our other issues with some of the STRs when everybody's trying to get to the same place, probably at summer.
Can you just expand? You're saying yes, visitors are not staying in the, I'm trying to understand. You were suggesting that we attract more people to come by bus? Is that?
Yeah, that would be a
Underlying
good
it?
idea. Yeah, so
Okay.
that might be something we can look at for sustainability reasons, and also helps with our traffic and summer issues as well, right? So, because I think in the past we did have more in the village area, and now we apparently have like none.
Is that correct, Mr. Allen?
I'm looking at the map on page 40 of the agenda.
Mm.
There is one dot right, looking like it might be right in Sechelt, but perhaps Trail Bay Estates and Porpoise Bay. So in the general downtown area, but just without the further information at my fingertips, just looking at one PDF, it looks like there's maybe one downtown area.
Huh.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I was a little interested that some of the STRs might have gone to 3-month rentals. So I'm wondering, when they do that, is that kind of another form of STR? Because I noticed the provincial legislation allows 3-month STRs, but that they do consider 3 months to be STRs.
Mhm.
So it's something to think about, because we don't enforce that at all. Does that become part of the Residential Tenancy Act? I just have questions about that. So it's another flag for me that maybe some STRs are operating, going past the 30 days. I don't know how much, I don't know how often, but I can see that happening as a result of our legislation and our own bylaws. Something to think about. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Inkster?
Yeah, I wasn't clear what Councillor McLaughlin was indicating about walkability and access to STRs in our downtown core. Are we suggesting tourist zones? Is that what we're talking about? Or, because that's what that is in consideration. So I just wanted some clarity, because that's where you have accommodation and you could envision as part of a community plan transition, commercial zones that would also include tourist zones in the downtown core, as an example, to not conflict with the residents in the further neighborhoods that
Mm.
don't want it
A
wide
whole,
open.
a whole neighborhood is STRs and another neighborhood is,
One is maybe zoned so that it is allowed under particular constraints. In other neighborhoods, obviously, there'd be more restrictions based on the people that are treating as
Okay.
residential
well,
area.
let's,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
hear from the Councillor McLaughlin.
Yeah, for clarification, no, that's not at all what I'm suggesting. In fact, what's happening is the antithesis of that, is that we're getting nobody staying in the downtown area and everybody's going to the surrounding areas. Because, and then they're obviously taking their cars. So I'm not in any way implying a tourist accommodation zone or the downtown being converted to anything like that. Thank you.
Something else, Councillor Inkster? Microphone's still on.
Well,
Go ahead.
so, is it still on?
It is still on.
It
No.
always says red, which means stop to me, but,
I mean, speak.
yeah, this is an interesting document and the recommendations at the top, which basically is staff fairly interpreting the provincial movements and statutes to look at the type 3 to not be allowed in order to encourage potentially that to become long-term housing, which is a need in our community. So it's interesting that its suggestion is there and I'm glad that the planner mentioned that it may be something that would be implemented next year because that's when the regulations are going to come in anyway. Speaking to the broader issue of the STRs though, that we're dealing with, you know, we're still hearing from the community with some concerns, even with the previous rules and bylaws we've introduced to deal with some of the complaints. I keep hearing Sandy Hook. That's what I keep hearing is, so it's a quiet neighborhood and that's where I keep hearing some issues occurring. I will quickly say that years ago, it was Tawanik and Tillicum that you were hearing concerns about. There was a couple of problems out there and that became a big discussion topic, was B&B in the late 90s. And I know that two members of our audience here tonight are very familiar with that topic. So how do we deal with that? Because it's very difficult to have a patchwork quilt of regulations in our community. But I will say that the enforcement in that area is something I keep hearing about. And I know that other council members have heard about, and I know specifically Councillor Shepherd has also heard more complaints from Sandy Hook about some of the concerns. So, you know, how do we get there? And maybe the province will help us. Thanks.
Okay, so is there a question? I don't think there's a question you're asking of staff or anything on that.
The report's fairly clear and it points to dovetailing in with the provincial regulations, but we have an enforcement issue. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Just looking on page 30 at tables 3, 4, 5, and 6. Looking at the number of business licenses that we've approved for type 3s doesn't seem to add up with the license revenue for type 3s listed in table 6. So I'm just wondering, is there that many type 3s that were approved for their licenses and then walked away from the process? Or do we have some that are still outstanding or, yeah, just
Right.
seeking some clarification.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Because 3, 4, and 5 are total 27 licenses. I see Director Allen looking in the middle distance. Stefan?
Yeah, I could just add that is partially what happened. Not all the applications that were made there were, actually, I can't remember the exact cause, so maybe I won't bring it up, but there was something like that.
I wondered if it was prorated, if we finally approved something in, you know, June or July, did we only apply a 50% of the annual fee? Is my broad assumption.
I can say that the bylaw is not structured in that way. It's just simply a fee for business license, so we were unable to meet that request when it was received. But there were cases where folks were perhaps applied and haven't got there yet, or were given non-conforming acknowledgement and haven't followed up the business license. There's been a variety of circumstances, and it is difficult to summarize, but as I say, even some of the temporary use permits that were granted did not follow up with business license. So there's been quite a mixture of reasons here.
Right,
that
but
we
I
continue to
think you
filter
should
through.
go back, because this jumps into something, we got a lot of statistics here, and that's not the only one that I'm not sure ties together, so, you know, I think it's significant in that we've generated about $110,000 worth of revenue from, infraction penalties, and, or 28,000, I guess, and 80 some odd thousand for the fees. But we've heard the amount of costs involved in both designing this and implementing it has been, you know, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think we should, well, I'll leave it at that. I'd like to see that tightened up a little. Councillor Shepherd, please.
Just again, following up on the statistics, it would be nice to know of the bill or the tickets issued, how much of that has been paid? I wonder if anyone could tell us that.
Mr. Naus might be able to hazard a guess in a minute. Would
Would you
start
please
that while he
repeat
looks-
the question, Counselor?
If we could find out of the tickets issued, how much of those have actually been paid?
I believe that is somewhere in this report.
We'll, don't do it under pressure. We'll come back to that question while you're looking it up.
Very well.
Councillor McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I'm just wondering on page 29 of 40, I'm curious about the number of pending type 1 and type 2 licenses, 40 pending and 80 approved. So are those people coming along recently wanting like a big uptake in the number of people interested, or maybe give us some idea how long it takes? And maybe the public would like to know how long it takes from the initial start of putting in an application to actually getting it. It could take weeks, months, I don't know. So if you could
Very good.
clarify that, thank you.
Brown?
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. When we receive an application that's complete and has a site plan and everything else, it's typically issued within 2 weeks. Pending might be those that were operating without business license, and as we start to integrate the features that Granicus has to offer, we observe those without license, and Mr. Nias and his team have sent out a number of letters throughout the summer, and those are pending new applications that have come in since receiving notice of non-compliance.
I saw your hand, Councillor Bell, please. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, we didn't have the number of tickets, but we have the amount of fines that have been paid. And the amount that's been paid or due is $25,400. Paid or due, and we expect 100% of that amount will be collected.
I thought there was a 28,000, anyways, I think overall, council, I had observed these numbers are all very small. This is probably my overriding issue, that we've done a huge amount of work on this issue, and we've identified there may be somewhere between 200 and 280 short-term rentals. Boy, it's not very many in a community of 4,000 residences. So I'll leave that hanging for a moment. Councillor Bell?
Through the chair, through to Director Allen. I'm just looking at the legislation piece again, just as it reads, recently the province announced a position on stronger regulation for short-term rentals. The prohibition on short-term rentals within non-principal dwellings type 3 and removal of lawful non-conforming status is scheduled to commence on May 1st, 2024. So at this point, it's basically a strong regulation that's coming forward. That's as much as we know at this point, but there's nothing further in terms of, pretty sure that this is going to be coming through as a regulation from what I hear.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to go through the legislature and go
Right.
through their bylaw reading process, but the province, this is one of the many levers they've been pulling recently respecting supporting housing, and they're coming in very strong.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Councillor Shepherd?
Just,
Left you on the other side, so I didn't have to turn my neck.
I think we have to acknowledge the impact that our own regulations have had on tourism, and acknowledge the letter sent in on this item by Sunshine Coast Tourism. I was discussing this in the last meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, and they noted that revenues, booked revenue was down in Sechelt just slightly over last year, where it was up in the rest of the Sunshine Coast. So it is having an impact, but I'm encouraged by the comment that there's about a 2-week approval for new type 1, type 2 licenses, and hope that the community can take a look at that and convert a lot of those type 3 licenses into type 1 and type 2, especially as there's no cap.
Which would involve them moving into their house. Yeah. Councillor Inkster, you get to go first, and then Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I too received that, that letter. It was a little late because you try to get that information a few days before to put into the agenda. So, but I did read it. It's not, some of the information is not clear to me because it compares us to other areas. Is that Gibson's? Is that the rural areas with not as many regulations? Is there a change in accommodation due to the fact that there's a number of changes in regular accommodation Sechelt over the last few years with hotels changing use and or disappearing? So it wasn't clear. I would like to hear what's going on south of us in the other community that has regulations, although interestingly enough, they won't have to conform to the provincial bylaws like we will.
Yes.
It's strange with a community with a similar size commercial zone. Don't have to pay for RCMP and don't have to conform to these rules. Anyway, I want to get more into those statistics when they're presented to us to see what's going on as we make deliberations. Thanks.
Well, yeah, and I want to acknowledge Sunshine Coast Tourism for the letter. They could only respond to what they saw in the staff report, which only came out on Friday afternoon. So the fact that it's late is actually, I commend them for jumping around to get it done. We'll see. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, and I think that's significant because I don't think the staff report referenced much of this sort of information. So that's part of where I'm going with this. I actually, council, think we need a follow-up report to what we have here. I think that there's a number of questions that have been raised today. I've got pages of questions that I don't want to get into in this forum, but I think that it would serve us well, and not just to be accurate about our own initiatives, because in many ways we've been first. We're certainly leading a lot of other communities, and we're clearly leading the province. And I'd like to be able to take it to the province and say, look, this is what we did, this is what's worked and what hasn't worked. And, maybe you want to copy us, follow us for once. But I want to come back to how many long-term rentals have been created from, not sure who to look at, but how many out of this, the data that we've collected, I noticed, I think the words were a few long-term rentals have resulted from these regulations. Do you have any, can you be more precise? Are we talking 2 or 3 or 6? Because that was one of our primary goals, was the both the neighborhood fit and converting short-term to long-term rentals.
I have the number as of today, Your Worship.
Great.
And as a result of our bylaw enforcement, to date, 24 long-term rentals have been created as a result of our enforcement program. And some of those instances, the owners had gone to it already, yet their ads remained that they looked like technically short-term rentals, but we were able to confirm that they were now long-term.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them changed the minimum length of stay to 30 days. So they are no longer short-term rental as defined in our bylaws. They are now residential tenancy as defined in the zoning bylaw.
Right.
And the total number I have as of today is actually 24.
So 24 are now in the 30+ category and the long-term, or is it
This is
just
24 that that have become long-term insofar as their residential tenancy
over 30
as
days?
defined by the zoning bylaw.
Right, right, over 30 days.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, I think those are the sort of numbers that rather than general statements, I really encourage staff to we talked earlier this year about verifiable data. And I think that's been a big part of the process that was intended.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, thank you through the chair. On that point, I'm just wondering where that data's from. Is that people that were running a STR that we know of? Because there's a lot of people that were running STRs that we didn't know of who might have well converted to long-term rental. And we can't really know how many people are even running long-term rentals. I mean, it's something maybe we should require a license. If somebody's running a long-term rental, at least we'll know then what they are, where they are, and can find out if they're legal conforming or not. So I question that number of 24, in terms of philosophically and practically knowing how
Okay.
it's pretty hard to track everybody. Thank you.
Right. Okay, and my question was, what data did they have? So I appreciate the answer. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I don't, Your Worship.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Bell, please.
Through the chair, along the line, same line as data. I think, as mentioned earlier, this is an issue that is a real concern for many in the community, whether it's someone that lives within the area that's by a short-term rental, whether it's our small businesses, whether it's those people that have bought for rental properties and investment properties. It is not an issue, and we've certainly recognized that. And saying that, we can see that the province is now stepping in. The main priority, as you can hear everywhere you go, is affordable housing and affordable rentals. That's all that we're talking about right now. So what I really want to do is to encourage, along the same line as what Mayor Henderson is saying, keep the data, because as we go forward, this is the kind of data we're going to need to see the impact and how we're making the decisions, because we're moving again from one swing to the other swing right now. Pendulum is moving very quickly to the other way. And that happens. We're going to have to find a balance of it. We, the province, our municipalities, we know that's going to happen. So please, I encourage the small businesses, everyone to keep your data as best as you can, because it really will help us as we go forward in seeing how this is going to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
I guess I love this topic, but again, we're talking about provincial policy, our own, turned out to be a good attempt at trying to get a handle on things. We're obviously on the right track because the province is pretty much emulating what we've been doing. But I am still wanting to highlight that STRs are the commoditization of housing. People say they've made an investment, they want to run a business, but the fact is we need housing for people that live here, that we need to live here. And we need to think about the trade-offs being made. And we still have, in my mind, a huge water issue, especially in the summer. So again, how many STRs we have is going to affect all that. So, I mean, I'm more inclined to a type 1 STR where, units that are available for people to rent are going to be put up in the market for people to rent. And the housing, people will be using their home in the summer to some extent anyway. Having people use a spare bedroom or two is probably the most sustainable way to go by far. So I would like to somehow encourage more of that. I don't see too much of that uptake happening. And so those are my concerns with STRs. And our original consulting report limited, I believe they said they would recommend only 20 STRs for Sechelt. So let's go back to that report and read it and understand. And they clearly said at the end of their report that it was seriously affecting our rental housing situation. So we want to build more housing, but the best housing to provide for people is the housing we already have. It's there, it's much more affordable, and we need to use what we have better. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I turn to Councillor Inkster, We need a lot of housing. And this goes back to measuring it. We need probably, you fill in the blank, but I'm gonna say 800 to 1,000 units of rental housing, affordable housing. So we're sitting here talking about what appears to be somewhere between 50 up to 50 type 3 STRs. So I'm not saying that we should ignore it, but we got to put our time into what do we do to encourage the building of that 800 or 1,000 units? And I encourage council to think about that. That's got to be our priority. Councillor Inkster? I know he said, but I recognized you first, so.
Okay. Is it me? Yeah, you know, the 24 number, this will be interesting going forward. It's sort of like the water reports that Councillor Director Elton and I here at the regional district, where we're counting liters and how much more water we have. And this is a figure that, like that, is really important to me because in my mind, although there's the building side that you referred to, but that's separate. This is 24. We don't have the clear statistics, 24 potential families, 24 individuals with people living with them in their home, 24 local workers that we need that found housing in our community. And I was thinking Ms. Niehaus was going to say 6 to 10. So I'm quite happy with that amount. And as we go forward, that 24 families, et cetera, have found housing, 24 sets of workers have found housing. Thanks.
Thank you. And I want to clarify, I think a number of people, I certainly know some that have done this. They've gone from the weekly rental or the weekend rental to over 30 for workforce housing, which is great. You know, it's a win, but it is not converting to long-term rental for families. It may be contractors, it may be locums for medical industry and the like. Councillor Shepherd, thank you for your patience.
No, I realize that we're coming to the end of this, but even the workforce housing part is so critical and important in our economy. So even to have those small numbers, I'm appreciative of. But to echo one of your comments on statistics, I'll really be looking towards the building department planning on more detailed statistics on enforcement as we move on into the next season. Because I remember the debate, part of the debate before the new bylaw was brought in was, and this is I think a relevant comment from the Chamber of Commerce, how many actual problems do we have?
Mhm.
So if, you know, we're really looking to enforcement to find out how many are they type 3, a lot of them were around type 3, but how many are left as the regulations are brought in. So that's an important part for me coming on. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that from the conversation about party houses. And so I guess that would be a question. What complaints did we have about noise specifically?
Thank you, Worship. The general bylaw complaints we categorized as having to do with noise, parking, and those direct impact things on neighborhoods. Oddly, the majority of the complaints centered on 2 particular properties, and they were mainly noise.
On 2 properties?
Yes. So we do have 70-a-week bylaw coverage now. And if for after hours complaints, I intend to reach out to Staff Sergeant Prusy to remind her of the RCMP's responsibility when it comes to bylaw issues, and that we will be putting it out there that the RCMP are the ones to contact after hours.
Understood, but I guess the question that I'm hearing, we had 2 problem properties.
We did.
We did, or we still do?
I like to think we did.
All right. I like to think that too. Yeah, sorry, Counselor. Can't remember your name, so there, Counselor Rowe. You get,
course.
okay, all right.
Well, I just will make a comment as somebody speaking from the front lines. We have seen a difference. I don't know, I'm not sure how you gather data for things like conversions and how many long-term rentals we have, but I certainly know that we have hired nurses, for instance, who are now the tenant downstairs in the unit that they're renting upstairs. So they've gone from a type 3 to a type 2. So, and certainly, especially in the downtown core, VCH has leased quite a few homes, as have, like Solution Staffing has agreements with other landlords. So, and I just want to point out that here's where we are, at least in healthcare, that they're now doing contracts for over a year. So these aren't necessarily transient people that are coming for 2 weeks or 3 months. They're now embedding themselves in our community because they love it. And we've actually converted 2 to regular employees with the new nursing contract. So it is a type of investment in our community if we can provide housing for workforce, because there are plenty other parts of the country they're coming from and nowhere's as beautiful as this place. So the conversion rate can be there. I guess my question around enforcement with the new regulations being provincial in nature, do you see any change in our ability to enforce either way? Enforcement would still lie with us, correct?
That's a great question. And through the chair, we will watch that unfold. The province throughout 2024 will be building a registry. They do have plans to build an enforcement team. I do believe, and so we'll see how that unfolds. I still believe we'll be the first line of enforcement. Absolutely. The Agricultural Land Commission has an enforcement team. For example, our folks work with their folks. They're 2 or 3 years behind on files. Natural Resource Officer has an enforcement team, but we still respond to tree cutting and land clearing and so forth. So I do see this. I don't know if duplication is the right word, but some potential synergy if I'm going to be optimistic. But they do intend on creating an enforcement team, and we'll see how that unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's Councillor Toth and then Councillor McLaughlin.
I was just gonna move the recommendations on page 27 as presented.
Seconded. Okay, discussion, Councillor McLaughlin. I'm sorry, did you want to speak to? No.
A couple things. The notion about us needing 800 units, and I think that relates to the Cover the Coast report perhaps, but I want to point out that that report didn't really take into account our water issue. It's kind of an all things being equal study. And so things are not equal in a place where we've had such drought and such water issues, which is, I think in even the financial survey that came up sky high as a #1 concern for what's going on here. Also the idea of workforce housing. I have seen that units are being rented out almost like rooming houses, I hate to say, where somebody buys a house and it's being rented out to numerous people that are their employees or contracted out somehow. I just want to point out rooming houses is not a legal use in Sea Shelf, and it's kind of happening under the radar. I mean, I know we want to provide some housing for them, but I mean, the idea sometimes is, especially for construction crews for larger projects, which we have starting underway, that maybe they should bring their own workforce housing in the form of ATCO trailers or something should be looked at. Because, yeah, just using houses for workforce housing like that does still take them out of the market for people that are here that need those affordable houses for their long-term lives. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Other discussions? I wanted to, in terms of the motion that's before us now, some of this is fairly anticipatory of the provincial legislation coming in. So, you know, I think that there may, inevitably, there will be changes to the potential legislation. And so some of the things that I would just like us to see how things go in the coming months. We don't need to pursue this particularly. And in particular, I mean, it is pending legislation. I'm looking at my notes. Things could change. I'm reminded of the CEBA, you know, the loan to businesses that was to be repaid and then it was changed. I just don't see that we need to move too quickly on these recommendations. And then I did say earlier, I really feel that we need an update to the report before us to recognize some of the questions and answer some of the questions that we've raised here today. So for that reason, I don't feel inclined to support the motion. The other things, I guess, that I'd offer council, it was mentioned, we are under the regulations because we're over 10,000 people. It's a really strange situation because, you know, I don't know how many of other parts of the community where this will apply. You know, you're in the Lower Mainland, everything is covered. You're here, you could be on this side in Sechelt, and you could be a block away in Half Moon Bay, and you're under different legislation. So I'm actually inclined to either, don't hate me, Half Moon Bay, but that the whole coast should be under these regulations, or we should be exempted. And council, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Parksville has already said they're going to be seeking an exemption because of I think it's the surrounding areas it's not applicable to them. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff for us to digest as we go through the next few months. Okay, so Councillor Toth.
Just a quick comment to make in that the rural areas of the Sunshine Coast already prohibit what we call type 3. Their bylaws do require the dwellings to be owner occupied. So we're sort of last to the game, if you will.
Councillor Inkster, thank you.
Thanks. Just as we proceed forward here, just speaking to your comment, the first one, I think that the government is committed to bringing these forward. The Premier has spoken on a number of subjects strongly, and that includes providing more housing for the people of British Columbia. And they have a strong majority in the Legislative Assembly, as we witnessed a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not concerned as you have presented your argument, and yeah, thanks.
Okay, anything else? The motion before us, so we'll call the question. All in favor? And I'm opposed. Okay, I guess that brings us to the end of this agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor? We are adjourned and time for questions.